Hello everybody, it's Kara from Wild Book Garden, and today I'm here with the Omnivore Book Tag. This tag was originally created by Emma from A Cup of Books, and I was tagged by the lovely Ellie from Earl Grey Books. I will link both of them down below, as well as the original video. And I'm really excited for this tag because I talk about a lot the fact that I read very widely. That's something that's very important to me and that I enjoy doing. And the premise of this tag is you pick 4 genres that you read a lot from, or like 4 of your favorite genres, and you try to make them as distinct from each other as possible. Like, you want as much difference between them as you can, and then you go through and you answer 3 questions for each of those genres. Like, they're the same 3 questions, and those questions are: number 1, what is your favorite book from this genre? Number 2, what book are you currently reading or just finished from this genre? And number 3 is, what book on your TBR from this genre do you think you'll read next? And I'll tell you, I kind of was a little loose with that interpretation. Like, you guys know I have a ton of favorite books, so I just picked one of my favorite books from these categories. And then the what book on your TBR from the genre do you think you'll read next? I just picked one that I'm like very excited about. Like, some of these might be ones that I read next, but I don't know that for sure. Like, I definitely want to get to them soon, but I don't know for sure that they're what I plan to read next from that genre. So let's get into it. So I picked 4 of my favorite / most read genres. I picked fantasy, historical fiction, contemporary, which I never would have thought would be on here. Like, if you told me this a few years ago, I would have been shocked because I never used to feel like contemporary books could like get to me in the same way that books from other genres could. And then the last one is nonfiction, which again is not, like, I know compared to some people who read almost entirely nonfiction, I probably don't seem like I read that much, but compared to what I used to read, which is very, very little, like almost none, to the fact that I average like 2 to 3, well, maybe closer to 2 nonfiction books per month, I think that's a lot for me. And I really love nonfiction, even though it's like, this is more of a category of books than a genre, but I wanted to put it in this tag anyway. Okay, so enough rambling, let's just get into it. So starting with fantasy, one of my recent favorites is this duology, that is Redemptor. The first book is Raybearer by Jordan E. Fueko. This is easily one of my new favorite series. It's a West African inspired fantasy, and I think the way that this series talks about things like responsibility and trauma, like the way it handles really complicated relationships, is just so impressive. I love Tarasai as a main character. She's probably one of my all-time favorite characters. Like, I love her, like the way that she is so compassionate and so brave and so determined. And like, seeing her in this book especially, like, try to figure out like how much she can do by herself, and like the fact that she doesn't always have to be by herself, like, it just, I really love it. I think the writing itself is fantastic. I think the plotting is masterful. Like, in both books, the way that like the books are divided into different parts, and the way that Jordan E. Fueko builds with each part, like, she builds the story and she opens it up and you get like this bigger and bigger like world and setting and story is just so impressive. The world building is really rich. Like, I just really loved it. The ending of this series is fantastic. It is so satisfying. I just really, really love these books. And then a fantasy book that I'm currently reading is The Frozen Crown by Greta Kelly. I don't think I've heard anyone talk about this book, but I am really enjoying it so far. It's about a main character who is she's trying to win support to protect her kingdom, because they're being invaded by this like empire that is taking over a lot of other kingdoms, and nobody really wants to believe things are that bad. Nobody really wants to help her, so she decides to join the court of this other kingdom to try and like basically use diplomacy to like win support for her cause. And I am already really enjoying this one. I think the stakes are really high, and I think that's really clear from the beginning of the book. I really like our main character. I like that she knows what her strengths and weaknesses are, and she's not afraid to use those. Like, she definitely makes mistakes, but I always understand why she does what she does. And she's definitely up against a pretty significant obstacle, which is basically just apathy. Like, you can tell how frustrated she is trying to make people care about her kingdom and about the people who are suffering. And I think the side characters are really interesting as well, so really enjoying that one. And then as for one that I hope to read soon, I am so excited for this. This is The Beautiful Ones by Silva and Moreno Garcia. This is a historical fantasy book, which, considering I love fantasy and historical fiction, probably not surprising that I really love historical fantasy. But this was a present from my lovely friend Yvette from Book Cave, and I actually had this book like specifically recommended to me by Bethany from Beautifully Bookish Bethany. This is one of the books that she thinks I especially would really enjoy, so I'm excited for that reason as well. And also, my friend Mariana from Mariana Mas Books and I are going to be buddy reading this, so that will be really, really fun as well. And I just can't wait to get to this. We know that I really love Silva Moreno Garcia, and the fact that that is a like Regency historical fantasy, like, I'm so excited. Next is historical fiction, and one of my favorite historical fictions, even though this one does have a fantasy or mythology element to it, I still picked it for this category, and that is Lovely War by Julie Berry. I actually have a whole spoiler-free review for this book that I will link, but I really love this. This is set primarily during World War I, and the frame story is fascinating because it is narrated by the Greek gods, especially Aphrodite. She's one of the main ones, and she tells a story because she is caught by her husband Hephaestus with Ares, the god of war. Like that's like a very well-known myth, and this book kind of uses that myth as a jumping off point. And so the reason she tells the story of these two different couples is she's basically trying to justify the importance of what she does, like the value of love and what it accomplishes in the world and why it matters and why it shouldn't be brushed off as like touchy-feely nonsense, basically. And I love this book so much. I love the characterization. I love the blend of history and mythology. I think like the themes that this book talks about, like I really, really love the way it talks about the value and the importance of love and caring about people, and how like it's not a weakness, it's like something that matters, and that it can cause like really big things to happen in the world. Like it shouldn't be discounted as a force. I love the way this book focuses on the value and the importance of ordinary people. Yeah, I love the relationships in this book. I appreciate the discussion of the historical context. Like one of the main characters is a black man, and he is in the US Army, and so the book does talk about the treatment of black soldiers and how even though they were fighting and dying for their country still treated them, and I just think all of that was done really well. Again, I like the relationships and the characters themselves. I just really, really love this book, and I know that it's like reasonably well hyped at this point, so I don't want to like, I don't know, add to the overhype, but I did really love it. And then I actually apparently haven't finished a historical fiction since last month, which I was kind of surprised at for some reason. But the one that I did finish most recently is The Quiet Gentleman by Georgette Heyer. I mean, I think technically Georgette Heyer, like she wrote romances and she wrote mysteries, but I, like in my head, I put her books in the historical fiction category sometimes. I don't know, it made sense for me to put this book as the answer to this question. That's all I can say. Georgette Heyer is an author who, like, I love Cotillion by her. That is one of my favorite books, one of my favorite comfort rereads, but I have not yet found anything else that I enjoy as much as that one, but I always have a reasonably good time with her books. Even if I don't like the love interest or the romance, which often happens, I like her writing and I like her humor, and I just, like, her books feel very cozy to me. So I was really thrilled that this one I think is my second favorite. Which is funny because it's not considered one of her better works, but I had a great time because the hero is not a rake, which Georgette Heyer, I feel like, wrote a lot of kind of rake characters or reformed rakes as her heroes, and I hate that trope. So that's, I think, why this one worked for me so well. There's also like kind of like an attempted murder mystery type thing that I think was really interesting. Like, again, that's something that I think a lot of people felt was lackluster, but I feel like it was a fun subplot. I really liked our female main character, especially. Like, her name is Drusilla, and I adore her. She's just like so practical, but also like romantic in some ways, and I just liked that balance. Her parents were also really fun and interesting characters, and yeah, I just had a really good time with this one, so I'm glad that I have found another Georgette Heyer book that I do really enjoy. So, by the way, I'm not currently reading historical fiction, which is why for that one I picked the most recent one that I had finished. And then one that I am very excited to get to, that I hope to get to soon, is So Many Beginnings by Bethany C. Morrow, a Little Women remix. This is in the Remixed Classics series, which is by a bunch of different authors, and this is a retelling of Little Women featuring a black family, like as the March Sisters, which I am so excited for. I really loved her Song Below Water duology. I know not everybody did, but I really enjoyed that one, and I am so excited for this because Little Women has never been one of my favorite classics. One thing that I always thought was kind of like weird or interesting is how, at least when I read it, it felt very disconnected from the time period it was set. Like, when I first read that book, not even when I just first read it, like, I think I read that book a few different times, and every single time I just kind of assumed it was like an English classic because it felt so divorced from the setting, which was the American Civil War. Like, I just find it very odd that that's not brought up very much. Like, they talk about their father being in the war, but it's not super clear, at least as I recall, it's not super clear that it's the American Civil War they're talking about, and so I love the idea of centering a black family in this story, and I think that I feel like I'm gonna like this retelling more than I like the original because I just have some issues with that story. Like, basically a lot of the endings for the characters I really hate, so even though I like the writing and I like some of the ideas and I like some of the characters themselves, ultimately my feelings about Little Women are like more like neutral to negative because of how disappointed I am with some of that. So I'm excited to read another author's take on that. I don't know if she's gonna like change some of the character things or just like sell me on them better, but I'm pretty confident about this one. And then for contemporary, one of my favorite contemporary books is We Are the Perfect Girl by Ariel Kaplan, and I feel like I always have to give some like explanation for this one or like backstory. So this is a contemporary retelling of Cyrano de Bergerac by Emma Rostand, which is one of my favorite plays, like one of my favorite things. But if you don't care about that, or you think that sounds intimidating, or you don't know that play, just go into this knowing it's a contemporary, because I think it stands on its own really, really well. Like, as somebody who does love Cyrano de Bergerac, I really enjoy it as a retelling, but it absolutely doesn't require you to have that information to understand it or to enjoy it. So we're following our main character Ephra, and her best friend, I think her best friend is named Bethany. It's been a while since I read it, but they both have a crush on the same guy, but Bethany doesn't know that Ephra likes him, and so Bethany asks Ephra to kind of help her woo him, like to, I think, like write, like basically like advise her on like how to like get him interested, how to like basically help her to be more confident in front of him, because she's not very good with words, and Ephra is always known as like the smart one and like the confident one, and Bethany is like the really beautiful one, and that's why like the title is like together, like We Are the Perfect Girl, because the way like they see themselves or the way people treat them is that they have like this one strength, or that they don't have these other characteristics. And so Ephra agrees to do it, and because of some various things that happen, she actually ends up messaging the guy that they both like. His name is Greg, I think. She ends up messaging him, and he thinks that she actually is Bethany. And Ephra knows that she should like disillusion him immediately, but there are some reasons why she doesn't feel like she can or that she should. And then by the time she does feel like she should, it's like too late, and she's liking him even more now, and they seem to be getting along, but of course he thinks that he's talking to the other person. And I just really, really love this book. I love Ephra as a main character so much. Like, she is so smart and funny and good, and like I just love her, and I really loved seeing her realize how hard she is on herself, because her whole thing is that she believes she's okay being like the smart one, and that's it, basically, like thinking that she is like unattractive, but she doesn't care. Like, she doesn't care if people don't think of her romantically, because that's not her thing. And we see that she does care, and that it's okay to care about that. And we see that Bethany has always been written off as being the beautiful, brainless one, and she hates it, and it's not fair to her. And it's like the way, like, this book really talks about the way that like beauty standards hurt everybody, like even people who you think would conform to them. It's still a restrictive way of viewing people, especially girls. And I love the way that was done. Like, I really loved the complicated relationships here, like Bethany and Ephra's friendship, and I really liked the romantic subplot as well. And I also think this book did a really fantastic job of dealing with the ethics of what it does, of like what happens in the book. I've said before that like I have a few things that I kind of need to be convinced of in order for me to be okay with this plot line, and I feel like this book did a really good job with that, because I understood how Ephra got into this situation. I understood why at the time she wouldn't think it was a big deal, and I also understand why by the time she realized it was a big deal, she would care too much about this person to ruin their relationship by like telling the truth, even though she knows she should tell the truth. So even though this book does have some like dishonesty like in these relationships, I think it handled that really brilliantly. Like, I just really, really love this book. I highly recommend it. It is so underhyped. It doesn't have very many ratings on Goodreads at all, and I just love it. So even if you're not like a big contemporary person, I feel like this is a really well done one. And just like the way it talks about things like body image and like self-worth and self-love. Like I mentioned in my review for this one that like there were things that like Ephra says or like that happen in this book that like I thought wouldn't affect me the way they did, because I'm like older, I'm more confident now, and it was not true. Like, I still like wept, like my chest hurt. I was so like invested in this book, and I felt for Ephra so much. Also, there's a really positive representation of therapy, which is great. So I just love this book. I've gone on about it a really long time. And then one of the most recent books that I finished that is a contemporary. This is a picture book, and it is Crowned with Glory by Dorina Williamson, illustrated by Shalene Rodney. It's a celebration of black hair, like specifically young girls and their black hair, and the illustrations are lovely. Like the variety of hairstyles is wonderful. I love the way that this book ties loving and celebrating young girls' black hairstyles to like opportunities and like to representation and to like being able to achieve your dreams. Like I really like the way he made those connections, and I really loved that one. And then a book that I'm very excited for is Dream Annie Dream by Waka T. Brown. This follows our main character Annie, who loves musical theater, and she is so excited when she gets cast in The King and I, which is the show that her school is doing, until some kids start saying that the only reason she got cast is because she's Asian, and the play involves Asian characters. And so this book deals with like racism, it deals with like typecasting and like representation in theater, and I just think it's going to be fantastic. I love books about theater. I love books that deal with the bad parts of theater and like addressing those and working to be better about those. So I just think this sounds incredible. I am so looking forward to reading it. And then finally, nonfiction. One of my favorite nonfiction books is Braiding Sweetgrass by Dr. Robin Wallkimmer. I have it put away so I don't remember the subtitle, but this is one of my favorite nonfiction books of all time. I think it's just one of my favorite books of all time, period. This is a book that talks about Dr. Kimmer's training as a botanist, but also about her indigenous identity and spirituality, and how that like that influences her view of the world, and how these things are not mutually exclusive. They can actually inform each other. I believe she's a citizen of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation, and I just think this is beautifully written. I think the way that she talks about like the natural world and people's connection to it and how important it is, the way she talks about language and how that affects our treatment of things or beings, is incredible. I just love the way that she writes. This is just a really fantastic collection of essays, and it's hard for me to articulate like how much I love this book, because it just hit me so deeply. Like I mentioned, I really love the emphasis on the fact that Indigenous knowledge is not inherently less useful or less correct. I really love the fact that this book shows how you can be scientific and you can be spiritual or religious, and those things do not contradict each other. I love the value this places obviously on the natural world, and the way that she connects experiences or like plants or like animals in the natural world to like issues of like community and relationship and just like the world in general. Like I think that she did the nature writing part of this beautifully, but I think she also went a step further and she used that to say things about the world and about people and like about humanity and different species. And like I just really love this book. I know this one is thought of very highly by many people, so this is not like a new recommendation, but I really adored it. And then a nonfiction book that I'm currently reading is Go Back to Where You Came From and Other Helpful Recommendations on How to Become American by Wajahat Ali. This is a memoir by obviously Wajahat Ali about his life and about his identity as a South Asian person and also a Muslim person, and how he kind of became the like poster child and like, you know, friendly expert basically and like spokesperson for like Muslim issues. And I'm not very far in, but I am already really loving this. Like he is so funny and biting and also like very warm. I just have really enjoyed following him online for a while, and so when I knew he had a memoir coming out, I was very excited for it. And I'm not very far in, but I already love this. And I also wanted to mention the nonfiction book that I just finished like late last night / early this morning, and that is On Juneteenth by Annette Gordon-Reed, I think is her name. And this is a very short nonfiction. I actually listened to this on audio because I had heard that the audiobook was really good. Let me actually look up who narrated it. Karen Chilton, it looks like. And I concur. I think the audiobook was great. We know I struggle with audiobooks, but I think this one was done really well. And this is a nonfiction book that is obviously about the holiday Juneteenth and what that is and what it means, but also she really delves into the history of Texas, specifically of Black people in Texas, and like in a way this is a very focused nonfiction book. Like she also does a really great job of using the issues she talks about and the specific like history of Texas as kind of a microcosm or a representation of the history of like African Americans more generally, or Black people more generally. Like I think she balanced the like specific and the general or like the wide focus things really well. I think this is really approachably and engagingly written. I definitely learned a lot. Like I thought this was fantastic. And then a nonfiction book that I definitely want to get to soon is a relatively new release. This came out near the end of last year, and that is Hidden Mercy by Michael J. O'Loughlin, AIDS, Catholics, and the Untold Stories of Compassion in the Face of Fear. So this is a book about the HIV and AIDS crisis, and some of the people in the Catholic Church who were actually working to take care of people, like who took the opportunity to choose love and mercy instead of judgment and hatred and violence, because obviously the history of the Catholic Church and the LGBT plus community is a very unpleasant one in most cases, and like the official teachings were horrible, and there were a lot of people who went along with that, but this book is about the people who didn't, and I have heard fantastic things. This has gotten really great reviews. Several writers who I really love have talked about what a fantastic book this is, and I just think it's going to be really valuable to read this. Michael O'Loughlin is a gay man himself, and I really want to read more like books by queer religious folks, and I just have heard fantastic things. I know this is going to be a very hard book to read, but I think it's so important, and from everything I read about this one, it seems like it's going to do a really good job of like discussing and acknowledging the harm that has happened and continues to happen in the church towards gay people, but then also the people who fight back against that and how important that is and how it's important to talk about those stories as well. So yeah, I just think this sounds incredible. So I definitely think that I will really appreciate this one, and this is definitely one that I want to prioritize. Okay everybody, so that was the Omnivore Book Tag. I had so much fun doing this, again, as somebody who loves to read very widely. I'm going to tag a few people who I know also read very widely, but there is no pressure, of course. And also, if you are not tagged but you would like to do this, please consider yourself tagged. So I'm going to tag Kelly from Cozy Reader Kelly, Aoife from Words of Clover, Olivia Savannah from Olivia's Catastrophe, Hana from LinhHermione, Margaret from The Word Nerd, and Annalisa from Annalisa Ely. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!